Oh, you're doing the segues now. All right, over to you,
Yes.
Swinny.
It's the mic way. Yes. So Assassin's Creed Valhalla released on launch day for Xbox Series X on the 10th of November, and a couple of days later for PlayStation 5. And 10th of November it was released on PlayStation 4 and PC and that as well. So, as was said before, I'm a huge fan of Assassin's Creed. I've played every single one of them with the exception of maybe some of the mobile titles and things like that. But I've completed every single one of them, pretty much all the achievements in every single game as well. I've when it comes to, I guess, like knowing these games in and out, if I don't know something, I'm really disappointed in myself. So whenever that comes up, I'm like, I
Okay,
should
spot
know that. I
quiz.
should know that.
What was the name of the character that would go into the Animus in Assassin's Creed 2?
Desmond?
What was his surname?
Miles?
Oh, come on.
Damn
man.
it!
Come on.
Good job.
That's pretty easy. Anyway, no more
Well, I
spot,
wasn't gonna
no
give
more
you a hard
spot
one.
quizzes. No more spot quizzes.
That was good. That
Okay,
was
fine.
good. And then you should just let him have it. You got wrecked. All right, go on, Swinny.
Okay. All right. So I was playing this on Xbox One X. So I don't have a Series X or a PlayStation 5. So I'm playing it on last gen now.
But you will, when it's in store in the next few months, for sure buy one.
100% he will.
Yeah. So I'm about 15 hours in the game, and honestly, I would want more time with it to probably talk to some of the stuff, because last week I mentioned that I needed more time in the game, and that's because they start rolling out more and more systems as you get further into the story and things like that. And so there's some stuff I haven't gotten to yet, which I'd love to talk to, but I can't. So some of it is I haven't gotten to any big narrative threads and seeing how that stuff plays. So I can't really comment on how good I think the story side is or anything. I've mainly been focusing on clearing out one region and doing some of the cool side activities so that I learn as much as I can about the different stuff you can do in the game and what it's like to play. And
Did you get off the intro map, or are you still doing?
yeah, no, I'm
that bit?
in England and doing all the work there.
Okay, cool.
Work there, all the stuff there. And
Spoilers.
I haven't experienced any of the like Norse mythology stuff yet, which is what the main thing I would have loved to have played to give my impressions on. But I don't know how far along into the game that stuff hits, and I didn't want to just rush through the main quest to get there. I wanted to play it as I'd play a normal Assassin's Creed game. So
Okay, because apparently shirtless Chris Hemsworth is in the game.
bring it on! Come on, love me some shirtless Thor.
That guy's hot.
All right. So, if anyone doesn't know, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is an open world action RPG. It's the 12th game in the main series, and it's the third in what people call the Layla Saga, or I guess the Origins trilogy. So, it's kind of the third in when the game became an RPG, basically became The Witcher with Assassin's Creed gameplay. So outside the Animus, the story continues directly from the Fate of Atlantis DLC for Odyssey. So just spoil for the next 20 seconds if someone hasn't played that yet, where you continue as Layla Hassan in possession of the Staff of Hermes, and she's basically it starts possessing you, screwing for head and everything. And there's a huge cataclysmic event that's happening that's screwing with like magnetic fields and destroying satellites. And so essentially they're trying to, through a link that they found with this buried Viking, they're trying to figure out how to stop the end of the world, basically. So it's almost like the Desmond 2.0, where he had to try to stop the world through going into the Animus and stuff. So inside the Animus, which is what most people care about, it's obviously about Vikings. You're playing as Ivor, who's an orphaned Viking on a quest to build a new home in the distant land of Old England. So this is very Old England. This is like, Saxons. This is before it was unified, so there's different kingdoms and things like that. The game does start out in Norway, which is a pretty big map, so we talked about that last week, but the getting to England, like if you just mainline and you don't sort of run around exploring that map for ages, you get to England pretty quickly. And that's where the main crux of the game begins, where you've got a settlement, you start building up your settlement. The narrative starts to pick up because in the prologue of the game in Norway, it's a bit of a revenge story where you're avenging the person who turned and killed your parents and stuff, and that's just like that ties that up pretty quickly. And then it's like, okay, now this is the new land. Now we need to go around different parts of England, build alliances, take over settlements, raid, do Viking stuff. And my thoughts on this whole Viking thing and you essentially being the invader is a little mixed, because I know when they first showed this game, it's like, okay, well, Vikings are known for raiding, pillaging, raping people, like horrible stuff. And I'm like, well, how do they make it so that you feel like you're not playing as the villain doing this?
Mm.
And they don't. You're doing that stuff. Well, you're not doing the raping part, of course, but
You pat dogs. You can pat a dog, so
But
you're redeemed.
You're like, it's like, okay, we need to raid this monastery of just monks, just like doing their stuff, and you literally raid the monastery, and it does say you can't kill civilians, but you kill all the guards and steal all their stuff, and it's like you are
guards had families too.
You are the bad guy. Like, are we the baddies?
Sounds
You
like
are the
it.
baddie.
I love the are we the baddies sketch, and that's exactly what I was thinking of. Are we the baddies? We're crushing the heads of monks. And maybe we're the baddies.
And there's moments where, like,
Oh look, there's a dog. Let's pet it.
there's moments when Ivor's shown as a really good person, and then it's like, and then it's just going around raiding and being a Viking. It's like, unlike previous protagonists in Assassin's Creed games, I don't feel like a good guy. You're doing horrible things in pursuit of a good goal. This is not. You're just being a Viking. Like, and I think that stuff will start to pad out as the wider narrative comes to be.
Maybe.
So I think that will probably change a bit. But to begin with, it's definitely, okay, we've got this settlement. Let's go raid places and then bring all the stuff back, and we can build a settlement up. Man, anyway.
I love it.
But in terms of gameplay, look, it follows what was built from Origins and Odyssey. So anyone to play the last two games, it's going to feel very familiar in some ways, but it's actually quite unique in other ways. Like when it comes to controls, the free running, that stuff's generally the same. The combat is very different. I'll get to that as a separate thing soon. There's less of a ship focus than Odyssey. So Odyssey had a lot of, it kind of had a bit of a black flag thing where you're building up your ship and you do ship battles. This is pretty much using a longboat to go down rivers instead of your stuff. It's like you're within the English countryside. You're not out in the ocean in this game. There's less, I guess, icon bath, if that makes sense. So we know that a lot of Ubisoft, and especially Assassin's Creed games like Syndicate was really bad for this, where you will synchronize each area, and then unlocks and shows all the icons, like hundreds of icons across the map, and you're like, oh my god, this game doesn't do that. So there's definitely icons.
I thought there was an option where you can switch it on and off.
So I'll get to that stuff soon.
Yeah.
So even with that option set to the max, you still don't see that amount of icons. It's very different.
Cool. Okay.
But what they've done in this game, so there's 3 different settings for your gameplay experience. So one is combat difficulty. So you can set that at 3 different levels. Just for context, I left everything as normal recommended. Then there is the exploration. Now, Odyssey had this as well, where you could turn off all icon markers and you have to rely on like the quest log, then figure out from the quest log where to find it. It was really cool. This is a little different, but it still has options to, on how much it wants the game to hold your hand or not. But then it also has a third option, which is stealth difficulty. So when we talk about accessibility, this game has it in spades. It doesn't have meters like a lot of games, sports games specifically, where you're like, oh, I want them to pass this amount, and you drag the meter. Like, it's not that level of accessibility, but it's still really cool the way they've implemented it. But in general, just the exploration in this game feels very different in this one. It doesn't feel like there's stuff everywhere, and when there's stuff around you, it's actually really worthwhile exploring and finding that stuff, because you'll find cool world events, cool puzzles, and I'll get to some of that stuff soon, but it just feels very different. It's hard to explain, but as someone that's so used to the Assassin's Creed kind of model, this game they've taken a very different approach with it. Mentioned before, Mike, you mentioned, these games always have settlements where you have to take out the top guard and stuff. This game definitely has some of that stuff, but it's not like marked on your map, clear this settlement or anything. It's like, okay, this settlement will have a treasure, and you'll know that there's a general treasure in that area.
Okay.
And you can that treasure might be on a really tough guard, or just might be in a chest. And when you get that stuff and you get the treasure, you just get out of there. It's very different. It's more like you're collecting points of interest as opposed to ticking things off.
I think it's a much better approach. I mean, the horses for courses. I just think it just adds more to the exploration. You mentioned last week that there's unique weapons, unlike the previous installment.
So, I mean, there was unique weapons in Odyssey and Origins, but they were mixed in with a whole bunch of random equipment.
Okay.
So it was like, you know how with a game like Diablo, where you'll have your unique loot, but then you'll have a whole bunch of randomized loot and stuff.
Yes.
That's the way that Origins and Odyssey did it, and Odyssey went quite crazy with that. This game, it's all unique stuff. So, and if I haven't played around with a lot of equipment yet. I'm still kind of upgrading the stuff that you get in the first area. But they all have unique buffs, and just like past games, they've got set buffs. You know, if you've got 4 out of 5 of the Raven Clan set, you'll get, you know, different buff levels. I mean, that's common for RPGs and things. But it's fixed locations for this loot as well, which is really different. Now, some stuff was fixed in the past games, especially for the unique stuff, but then a lot of it was randomized, and none of that's randomized anymore. So they've kind of scaled that stuff back a bit,
cool.
which I think it's for the better. Odyssey's, I've said before, but, you know, for the sake of this segment, you know, Odyssey is by far my favorite Assassin's Creed game. So the fact that they scaled that down a bit, and I think it's a positive, I think is a really good sign for this game.
Okay, interesting.
Because that's interesting. Because so far from what you're saying and how you're playing this game, I kind of assumed it hasn't gripped you as much as other Assassin's Creed games have. Because it's like, what, 12 days post release, and you've played, what, 15 hours?
Yeah, but I actually didn't play Odyssey until like a year after it came out. So I don't always play these games right away.
You're not a real fan.
So I actually wouldn't take that as an indication.
Okay.
Take that as more an indication of me being as obsessive compulsive and wanting to complete Final Fantasy VIII again and spending all my time doing that.
Priorities.
I remember you did hit me up as soon as it launched on Xbox Game Pass. I'm like, well, you're going to complete that. That's going to have its own achievement list, which it does.
And I'm like, there goes my weekend plans. So the progression is really interesting in this game. So Origins and Odyssey were very similar, that you essentially had these skill trees that were kind of almost on the same page. You saw everything up front. So like, okay, I wanted to get to that end of the skill tree, so I'm going to spec in this certain way. And you get skill points by, you know, just by completing missions and killing enemies and doing stuff. This game, there's definitely a big skill tree, but it's all hidden. So you can't actually see what the end game is unless you know already, or you look it up online, which I'm not going to do. It starts specking you out in the 1 of 3 directions. So, you know, general combat, stealth, and then ranged. And based on where you start specking, it's very similar to the sphere grid from Final Fantasy X, where you unlock nodes and then, you know, have to connect them and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. They changed that up. You can respec at any time. I don't know if there's any cost to it. It doesn't seem like there's a cost to it. So that's cool, especially considering you can't see what those abilities are going to be. So the ability that you can just reverse it helps.
So that's fascinating. So it makes you wonder why they even really introduced a mechanic like that, when a lot of people are probably just going to look it up online, and B, you'll at a certain point you'll have enough points where you'll just reskill, go up a tree, see what's there, reskill, go up the other tree.
I guess I just wanted to mix up the formula a bit, and I think I like it.
Could be good.
What's different is, so in Odyssey and Origins, you would unlock abilities throughout that, and you still do, but then you also get abilities differently in this game. You find what's called books of knowledge. So a combat ability is something you can map. You hold like right trigger, and then you can map to one of the face buttons. So you actually find those books of knowledge and unlock the ability to like launch through the air at someone from a book of knowledge. And it seems that I think they're fixed locations as well, which is interesting. And you find another book of knowledge for the same ability, it upgrades it. So I've only got about 6 or 7 abilities across, like there's like ranged abilities on the left trigger and melee abilities on the right trigger. So that's very different as well. So they've taken a different approach there. I'm not sure how I feel about that just yet. And I guess the other part of progression is upgrading your colony, which I mentioned. So that's very similar to Black Flag, where you can upgrade your like pirate colony, but it's just more expanded. There's also something called a feast buff that a whole bunch of buildings add to. So I haven't seen that play out yet. I guess that's you can choose to hold a feast at your, in your longhouse, your Viking house or whatever, and the hall, and then it will give you like buffs that will last for the next couple of hours or something like that. That's probably a pretty cool system if that's the way it works. And I guess for general mechanics, they've brought back social blending, which is an Assassin's Creed thing going back to the original games that they kind of phased in and out of importance throughout the series. So the way that works is, you look like a Viking. You're running around in towns looking like a Viking. So what's cool is there's this, you can toggle a cloak at any time that puts a cloak over all your equipment and everything. So you just look like a person in a cloak walking around, and then you can blend in. You can sit on benches. You can do old Assassin's Creed stuff. So they brought that back in. And so you can be a bit more stealthy with that, which is pretty cool. But unlike the other games, it makes narrative sense in this. The last two games, I should say, because in those games you're running around looking like a Greek person in Greece. In this, you're in a foreign land, so it kind of makes sense narratively. One of the other mechanics, this is something I'm not a fan of, is they've retooled the health system a bit. So in the beginning of the game, it's really awkward because on normal difficulty, the enemies hit pretty hard. The combat still can be a little punishing at times. Now, combat is kind of where I'm getting to soon. But I think that the health system, you have to basically get rations back and heal yourself by picking like fruit off trees and things like that. I think that stuff will get less annoying as time goes on because you're unlocking new ration slots. So I've already got about 3 ration slots. So I think that will become less of an annoyance eventually, but I'm probably not a fan of the change there. And what has been a big change is actually the way that your eagle works, which is actually a raven in this game, but the last 2 games it was an eagle. So in those games, in recent classic Ubisoft fashion, there's where you've got like wildlands where you'd send out a drone and you can mark people. In Origins and Odyssey, you send out your eagle and then mark all the people in the base so that you can see them they highlight and the icons above them. It doesn't work that way in this. In this, you actually have to use the old like assassin view. I can't remember what they call in this, where you put it in the right trigger, it sends out like almost like a sonar pulse, yeah, and then marks all the people near you. So that's different. I don't know how I feel about it yet, but they have changed things up, and it's kind of...
It'd make it harder, wouldn't it?
You'd think, but...
Because the range is small as
well.
Yeah,
but there's... I mean, it marks people in a pretty good distance, but it's definitely not as easy. Like, the using the eagle or the raven would have made it... That's definitely way easier.
Super easy, yeah.
But I don't know how I feel about it, because I kind of like the idea of scoping. Now, I actually still do use it to scope out, but it's more like, okay, I need to scope out this huge base on a mountain to find where the vantage points are, and I fly around and kind of you can mark and things like that. So that's pretty cool. Mentioned before the loot system, that's had a huge overhaul. But one thing I don't really like about it is... So Assassin's Creed Odyssey had a really cool upgrade system that meant you could really customize what buffs you had on your equipment. And with the unique equipment, a lot of that stuff was set in stone, so you couldn't change it. So the random equipment and crafting your own equipment and buffs meant that you could customize yourself. So I could stack buffs like plus 20% stealth damage across all these different pieces of loot and things. And so far, and I'm still early, I haven't really come across a way to really customize that stuff. Now, I will say there are runes you can put in. So there'll be rune slots that do that stuff, but it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel like you got as much control. I will say some of that stuff came later in like towards the end game with Odyssey. So this may also have some end game way to kind of really customize your equipment a lot more. Some other cool mechanics is that this game feels similar to Far Cry, at least New Dawn, because it's the only recent Far Cry I've played in a while, Mike. You'll remember how come up to a location, it's almost a bit of a mini puzzle and how to actually get into this location. So it's like, I need to shoot that, or I need to, destroy this thing. This game has a lot more of that than Assassin's Creed has probably ever had.
Oh, cool.
So you'll come up to just a normal village and a hut, and it's like, how do I get in there? And you've got to find the one breakable thing that's on the roof that you got to destroy to get in, and things like that. So even for just exploring, they've thrown a lot more cool little puzzles in there.
That's cool. It makes it more worthwhile and rewarding, I think.
Yeah, and just
coming across a place and
And just cool things like, you've always been able to sabotage alarm bells, but in this you actually have to shoot the rope, and it's pretty cool because a guy will run up and start ringing the bell, and you can actually, like, in mid-combat, shoot it as he's ringing it, and it, like, drops down and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
A couple of quality of life things added. You can now autopilot the ships. So I said ships is not a huge thing, but when you are at least on a ship, you can tell it to follow the coastline, and then you can also set it to follow the objective after that. And then you can set it to listen to stories, from people like reading poetry on the ship. You can set it to be a cinematic camera while it's autopiloting you there. So some cool stuff there. And some cool quick menu quality of life stuff like triggering raids, calling a longboat. So some really cool stuff there. Now, to get something I'm not as much a fan of, which is combat. So I kept mentioning combat there. And the reason I wanted to separate that was because combat's actually changed a lot. Origins and Odyssey were very similar to each other, where they were very much, okay, this is Dark Souls combat, put in Assassin's Creed. They were upfront early with Origins that, they've taken inspiration from games like Dark Souls, where they put stamina, light and heavy attacks are on the bumper and the trigger, respectively. You've got heavy focus on parrying and waiting for enemies to take action and then punishing. So this game, they've changed it up a little bit, so you still got some of that, but instead, light attacks actually replenish your stamina. So, Mike, I don't know if you've experienced this yet.
I have, yeah.
What it ended up causing me to do early in the game was just to keep spamming light attack all the time. So it felt really messy. So it didn't feel like the recent, especially Odyssey, it felt like you were in full control. The start of this, when I was playing Valhalla, I felt that I was mashing all the time, which is not how Assassin's Creed generally feels, especially the recent ones. But eventually you fall into a rhythm, you're parrying a lot more, and as you get abilities, you stop doing that. But I don't know how I feel about actually using a light attack to replenish that stamina. I think that I don't think it adds to anything. It's weird. I'm like, I feel like they changed something that didn't need to change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. I think it will start to get better as I get more abilities, but it does feel like a step down from Odyssey. But that's probably the harshest thing I'll say about this game, is that I don't know if the changes they made to combat benefit the game more than anything else. So I guess some other things, the world of activities that you do around the map, they've actually added some really cool stuff to this game. So one of the biggest things is world events. So world events are just, they're side quests, but they're not like side quests where you are, go a quest to kill or collect these things. It's more something that happens in the same area that you find it. So if you find an event, you don't feel like you're just adding these side quests to a quest list like you would in an RPG or in the past games. You come up to an event, you actually want to do that event then and there. And some of them are really, really cool. Some of them are a little stupid. There's some ones that are going around online that I won't spoil, that are a little ridiculous. But I will. There's one I'll talk about. It's very early. It's in the first prologue. But as an example, I'm walking around in these snowy mountains. I find a guy on a cliff, and he's talking about wanting to get to the afterlife, but not wanting to leave his belongings behind. So he's got all these crates, and you talk to him, and he asks for your help. And so what the whole world event is, you pick up the crates, and you're chucking his belongings off a cliff. And he's like thanking you as you're chucking all this stuff down this huge cliff. It's off a huge mountain.
That's awesome.
And then he's like, thank you so much. And then at the end of it, he runs and jumps off the mountain.
What?
Because he's trying to get to the afterlife.
Wow.
And it's like, and your character's like,
That's dark.
What the hell? And there's some of them are really funny, but some really like there's one that I'm trying to say without spoiling too much, where you like, this guy's like, you can do anything to me. I won't matter, because I'm like, he's all super religious. He's a monk. He's like, burn down my house, destroy my belongings. So you go around, you're burning all this stuff, and he's like, what, and then he gets up and there's this note or something underneath him, and then you find out he's got this shack behind his house with all these murdered people in it. And you're like, and he's like, I brought them to enlightenment or something, and then he attacks you and you got to kill him. Like, there's cool little events like that. And they've had some stuff like that in Assassin's Creed before, but they've put such a focus on it that I think it's really, really cool. There's some really cool puzzles as you go around. There's like mushroom hallucination puzzles. There's standing stone puzzles, which is like lining up visuals, like kind of like Batman Riddler trophies. Mike, you might remember in New Dawn, there's a whole section where you're under hallucination,
Yes,
where you have to
yes, yeah.
line up these. You have to stand in a certain position to find the shape that matches up in different environmental things, similar to that. There's lots of legendary
That's pretty
enemies
cool.
that every time I've tried to come across them, they've killed me. So that's definitely not meant for early game stuff, but they're just wandering around like the previous games. There's cursed areas that you have to like complete an obstacle course and destroy cursed objects. There's lots of cool stuff like that. But probably one of the coolest additions is some of the town mini games that they've added. So they've added this dice game called Orlog, and I don't know if you've actually played any of these, Mike, because they introduced these pretty early. There's Orlog, there's flighting, and there's a drinking competition. Now, the drinking competition is just a little mini game that you do for money, which is not bad. But flighting is
What's flighting?
Flighting is literally insult sword fighting from Monkey Island.
Cool.
So it's basically, if anyone doesn't know, it's basically Viking rap battles where you're countering people's rhymes with rhymes to then diss them. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
And Orlog is a really cool dice game that's very similar to, if anyone's ever heard of a game called Bang or Bang the Dice Game, where it's like a dice game where you've got pictures on that would give different things like a picture of a gun. You know, in this case is, you know, it has different pictures of different things you're doing, and then you get certain points and you use these like god abilities. They've actually spent a lot of time on this Orlog game. And it's pretty neat to just go around each town and beat like the local person and get new abilities and things like that. And probably the last thing I'll focus on is the presentation. So Assassin's Creed games have generally always looked gorgeous. You know, we talked about sometimes, especially the earlier games, they're definitely not the most colourful games, but they've gotten away from that. So especially the last game set in really colourful, you know, ancient Greece with ruins and flowers in Sparta and stuff like that. This game, because it's in the English countryside, still looks gorgeous, but also inherently you're running around lots of foggy moors and swampy forests. But then you will come across, when the sun comes out, nice green farmland. So it looks really nice.
Cool.
Lots of...
So it's like playing Forza Horizon, but...
yeah, pretty much.
A while
ago.
But
there's like obviously monasteries, castles, villages, rock formation. So it's really, really cool. I'm interested to get outside of the region I'm in, to go to, you know, old London, to visit Stonehenge and all that stuff. It probably... The map kind of takes up what is probably like, looks like about a quarter or a third of England. So pretty big map. And just, yeah, graphically it's great, but I'm playing it on the Xbox One X, so I can't judge what it's going to look like in PC on next gen. But
it looks really good on next gen.
But that brings me to the frame rate. So the frame rate of Assassin's Creed games on consoles has always been 30 frames, or like at best, right? And one thing, there's a couple of things that I didn't realize about what the next gen versions of these games do. So first of all, they run at 60 frames, which is actually unusual for Assassin's Creed console games, but thankfully they're now at that point. But I'm sitting here playing in 30 frames, of course. And it definitely feels really jarring at the beginning, because you're in a dark, snowy area in Norway that's, you're already learning what to do. You like, the map and compass system is quite different. And the frame rate's kind of it's the most jarring at the beginning of the game. But eventually, I'm used to it now. But anyone that's looking to play this game and is looking to get next gen soon, I, more than any other Assassin's Creed game, play this on next gen, because it's just, I reckon this game is just going to look absolutely amazing, as Mike said.
Of course, and at 60 FPS,
and that's Xbox One X that you're playing it on, which is the best Xbox they released.
Yeah, but you've got to remember, no other Assassin's Creed game has run at 60 frames on any previous PlayStation or Xbox console. They've always been 30. So this is the first time they've actually made the jump on a console. On PC, it's a different game. So,
but are you saying that on the One X it was a bit like there was stutter?
I don't know if it's so much stutter. It's just, it just felt jarring in the beginning areas, especially because it's dark and the colors kind of look a bit muddy. In, you know, and you're already learning, like, it did hit me at the start, man. When I heard that it runs at 60 frames, I'm like, man, like, we talked about it before and we joked about it. Like, if there's any game that might get me to get a new console, when I realized
you're gonna do it,
there's two reasons, right, that I did.
This is exactly what I said.
No, but there's two things I didn't
come over and see it on my TV.
I 100% like I remember that. There's two things I didn't know. First, that it ran at 60, because I wouldn't have assumed that for Assassin's Creed, because it's never run at 60 on console. And the other thing I didn't know was that the achievement list is shit. So there's no benefits for me as an achievement hunter to play
Oh
the
my
previous
God.
version.
No
Why
benefit.
even playing it now? I'd wait.
So that
Yeah, if you waited a year for Odyssey.
So there's part of me that thinks I might park this at some point. There's part of
I
me.
would
There's
park
part
it.
of me.
We're gonna
I
get a
would park
review
it
next
and
year.
enjoy it
We're gonna-
properly.
it's
Yeah.
gonna be like November.
What, this wasn't a review?
21.
Well, but you got to remember.
No, this
Oh,
is
this-
his Swinpressions.
No, but you've also
What did I do with the last 30 minutes of my life?
but you've also got to remember that they're releasing DLC and these are sizable packs over time. So by the time they release all the DLC, then I'll likely have a new console anyway. So there's part of me I'll keep playing it, but there might be a point where I'm like, look, I feel like
wait.
I've spent a good amount of time. Maybe I'll park it until like I'm still eyeing around Feb March as when I might pick one up. But yeah, we'll see how I go. But definitely, if you're not looking to get a next gen for a while, then this version is fine. But definitely, like that 60 frames is a huge thing. So
Well, it's 4K 60, I should say.
Yeah. You
Whereas
need
a
to
lot of the
come-
other.
Now that,
What were you saying, Mike?
no, I was just quickly saying, without a joke, now that lockdown's eased, you should come visit and check it out
On the PS5.
on the PS5, and then you'll instantly go to the shop to get an Xbox One.
Well,
Oh,
And
sorry,
then you'll be
Series X.
disappointed because
Oh
there
my
aren't
God.
any.
well, you got to remember. Like, I was so pissed off when they released the Ezio collection on Xbox One and Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered, and they didn't even make them 60 on those versions, even though the PC
Yeah,
version
which is
60.
weird because surely they
Yeah, anyway.
exactly could have.
So just to sum it all up, look, is this a good place to jump into the series? Yes. Like all the Assassin's Creed games are set up in a way where they're unique, and if you don't care about the out of the anima stuff, which a lot of people don't, then you can ignore it pretty easily. I do think I can't place this above Odyssey yet, though. I think that if you're going to play any Assassin's Creed game of the recent trilogy, Odyssey is the one I'll always recommend. A lot of people love Origins, but Odyssey is just absolutely brilliant to me. I cannot recommend that game enough. But this is still a good place to jump in. I think if you're looking for a game to play on next gen, it's a great one to play because there's not that many games that I think aren't old gen, last gen backwards compatible to getting upgraded. This feels like it would be a great next gen game. And honestly, if you like a game like The Witcher 3 or both the old or the new Tomb Raider games, this is the kind of game I reckon you'd love because it's kind of the mixture of those, the acrobatic puzzle, environmental puzzles with the action RPG and open world of Witcher 3. So I really like it. I don't want to sound negative on it. I just think some of the changes they made, especially around the combat, it so far hasn't felt like a positive. But I've loved playing it so far. But that's also coming from an Assassin's Creed fan. So it would have taken a lot for this game not to be my jam, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like thumbs up to you. More Assassin's Creed. If you're into that, get it.
More Assassin's
Otherwise,
Creed.
maybe wait for the next
But
gen.
I'll clarify, they've mixed things up, so it's not just like a repeat or anything. There's enough new here if to get back into it. So
No,
Nice.
fair enough. Fair enough. All right, well, that